The Eastern Roman Empire's defeat to Khan Krum at Pliska was an unrelenting disaster, the magnitude of which had not been seen in the Roman world since Adrianople almost 4 centuries before. The Emperor Nikephoros I was dead, and an entire imperial army had been annihilated. As with the Goths after Adrianople, the Bulgars after Pliska were not going away. While the defeated empire convulsed under various internal and external pressures, Bulgar conquests would continue and would climax at the Battle of Versinikia. Big thanks to Smite Blitz for sponsoring this video. Smite Blitz is a free-to-play tactical RPG available on iOS and Android, and you can support our channel by downloading and playing it via the link in the description. Journey through the epic battleground of Smite Blitz, where you control the gods. Wield Mjolnir as Thor, rain down lightning as Zeus, and protect your allies as Athena in your mythological adventure. There are more than 60 gods to collect. The list includes the deities from the ancient Egyptian, Greek, Roman, Norse, Japanese, Indian, and Chinese pantheons. Smite Blitz has a huge PvE campaign, and new chapters are added all the time. You can upgrade your gods in multiple ways, including their armor, weapons, skills, formations, and so much more. Play in various PvP modes, including the 1v1 real-time duel. Build alliances with your friends and fight for a place on the leaderboards. So what are you waiting for? To help our channel out, download the game via the link in the description or the pinned comment. The Empire's high command bore the brunt of losses against Krum's Bulgar armies at Pliska. Damage to the imperial leadership was immense, and the late emperor's son Stavrakius had been grievously wounded during the battle, which undermined his succession and signalled the start of the struggle for the throne. The main candidate for the imperial office was Stavrakius's brother-in-law, Michael Rangabe. He gained the support of leading Roman officers and was proclaimed Michael I, Emperor and Autocrat of the Romans, on October 2nd, 811, while Stavrakius withdrew to a monastery where he soon died. Luckily for the empire, Krum's Bulgar state was in nearly as bad a condition as its defeated foe. Pliska had been burned to ash, and the casualties among the population were high. It would take some time to recover. Krum set to solidifying support among the Slavic leaders, maintaining relations with the allied Sklaveni and recruiting fresh warriors. At this point in history, Bulgaria was a mixture of Turkic Bulgar migrants from Western Asia, some Byzantine Greeks, and a majority of native Slavs, who had initially been a subject people. In time, this combination would form the Bulgarian identity. Keeping Slavic chieftains on side was a crucial task for Krum, made simpler by the victory at Pliska. In the Eastern Roman Empire, Michael I was having problems with his army. Scant military experience and a lack of charisma meant that the new emperor lacked the vital confidence of his troops, who soon became restless with Michael's reluctance to take any decisive action. In this void, the troops turned their eyes to 2 theme commanders, Leo the Armenian of the Anatolic theme and John Aplekis in Thrace and Macedonia. The former was the most prominent army commander of his age, possessing a rich record of victories against the Arabs in the east. At that point, the Balkan front was the main focus of Roman attention, due to the fact that the Abbasid civil war was still ongoing. The only serious hostilities between the Christians and Muslims took place when Arabs, under the command of the Emir of Tarsus, mounted a raid on the Anatolic theme. This attack was easily repulsed by Leo, and further cemented his illustrious reputation into that of a man who could possibly be a dynastic candidate. By spring of 812, Krum was ready to attack. His target was a chain of Roman fortresses on the imperial border, as they posed a significant threat to the south and east borders of Krum's realm. Reducing them would render the frontier a more level playing field, whilst leaving the empire more vulnerable to Bulgar raids. In May 812, the Bulgars crossed the mountains and put the city of Debaltos, which commanded the north-south coastal road, under siege. Taking it would sever the main land route linking Constantinople to the Black Sea ports of Ankylos and Mesembria. Upon arrival, Krum encircled the city with his forces, cut off its supply lines, bombarded it with siege artillery, and devastated the fertile farmland around it. By early June, its inhabitants surrendered the city and were resettled in Bulgarian territory to bolster the potential military and economic prosperity of the state. Unfortunately for Michael, by the time he set off to relieve Debeltos, it was already too late. As the army received the news that the city had fallen, the thematic forces almost became mutinous. Though the unrest was quelled through generous donatives, essentially bribes, it was clear no further advance was possible that year. This failure also instilled panic in the frontier population, many of whom began to flee their colonies, leaving the border bereft of civilians or defenders, making it more vulnerable than ever. Bulgar raiding detachments now easily overran northern Thrace, solidified their control over the Sofia basin, and seized all of the empire's Black Sea ports north of Sophoulis, except for Mesembria. Many theme troops settled in the overwhelmed regions even joined the Bulgars, including several high-ranking military officers. This added a sophistication of command which benefited Bulgaria. The newly acquired regions were administered by a fusion of Bulgar chiefs and Byzantine Greek defectors. After completing the efforts of consolidation and conquest by the summer of 812, Krum's army arrived outside the isolated and crucial Mesembria with siege engines. Before beginning his assault, however, he sent an embassy to Constantinople with demands, the acceptance of which would mean peace. Krum's conditions were actually quite moderate, essentially seeking to revive the old treaty between Emperor Theodosius III and Tervel, which was signed in 716, a common border in northern Thrace, annual tribute of clothes and dyed skins worth 30 pounds of gold, the right for Bulgar merchants to trade in the lucrative markets of Constantinople, and finally, mutual return of prisoners, deserters and asylum seekers. Michael was open to this proposal, but pressure from his religious advisors convinced him otherwise, on the basis that returning Bulgars who had embraced the Christian faith was a violation of the gospel. The emperor attempted to negotiate, but Krum was not going to tolerate this, and in mid-October surrounded Mesembria. Positioned on a peninsula extending into the sea, and surrounded by strong fortifications, it would be a tough nut to crack. Despite such a strong position, Krum's deft use of defected Roman engineers allowed him to deploy sophisticated artillery to hammer the Mesembrian walls continuously, breaking enemy resistance in only 2 weeks. When it became obvious that no relief force would arrive from Constantinople, its garrison surrendered. The city, full to the brim with goods and money, was extensively looted. Amongst the rich plunder was the famous Greek fire and 36 projectors to use it. As the Khan had done with Debeltos before, he resettled the city's population and left it deserted. The onset of winter brought a halt to military activities, and Krum withdrew to Bulgaria. In February 813, Krum attempted to launch a surprise attack against a small Roman force encamped near Adrianople. However, Krum's plan was revealed by escaped Roman prisoners, allowing the emperor to muster his tagmatic units and intercept the Khan's force. Many casualties were inflicted on it, and Krum was forced into retreat. While it was a minor action, it was the first victory of Michael's rule, and he intended to capitalize on it. Taking advantage of the continuing peace with the Abbasids, the emperor began planning a massive spring campaign against Bulgaria. Michael mobilized contingents from across the empire, including the border regions in the Far East. While soldiers from the Asiatic themes were far from impressed at having to march such a distance, they nevertheless arrived in southeastern Thrace by early spring. Here they united with Thracian and Macedonian thematic troops on the fields outside Constantinople. Overall, Michael I probably had around 26,000 levied soldiers from all themes across the Eastern Roman Empire, many of which would have been barely trained recruits. On top of that, roughly 4,000 elite tagmata accompanied their ruler, for a total of perhaps 30,000, a massive army for the time period. He was accompanied by two senior commanders, the aforementioned duo of John Aplakes, strategos of Macedonia, and Leo the Armenian, strategos of the Anatolic theme. The campaign began disastrously, as the emperor delayed the march and then continuously failed to advance quickly on the Bulgars after it began. The army assembled in Thrace sat idle for at least a month before moving at all, causing plummeting morale. On May 4th, a solar eclipse occurred and was interpreted by the army as a sign of coming disaster. If this was not bad enough, the Imperial army was forced to forage for provisions during its extended stay on Roman soil, subjecting the Thracian population to widespread plundering by their own men. Pressure grew on the emperor from every angle, and he finally made a move. Michael marched towards the Bulgar border near Adrianople before ordering yet another halt. The constant delaying allowed Krum to muster a sizable force of Bulgars, and gave time for his Slavic and Avar subjects to arrive. Despite this, the Khan realized his army was still outnumbered as it entered the region of Adrianople. With the two armies close to one another, Krum encamped and awaited further information near the abandoned Roman fort at Versinikia on June 7th. The armies were aware of each other at this point, but both were wary to make the first move. Michael's highest officers, John and Leo, unsuccessfully and continuously pressed the emperor to attack now, but were continuously refused. For 2 weeks, the armies engaged in an elaborate game of marching out of camp, maneuvering for position, and then drawing up for battle. Then the opposing forces would engage in long-range missile skirmishes, but decisive battle was not joined. This resulted in a stalemate, but the Romans were suffering badly from attrition. Midsummer heat was sapping the strength of both armies, but the more heavily armoured and armed Imperial troops suffered more, a situation which was not helped by a lack of food and water in Michael's camp. Echoing the situation at Pliska 2 years earlier, the stagnant military situation increased levels of indiscipline and demoralization in the ranks, especially among Anatolian units. Finally, it all became too much. On the night of June 21st, John Aplakes, strategos of Macedonia, informed his emperor that he intended to attack the Bulgars the next day, and that he expected the central contingent under Michael and the left contingent under Leo to support him. Leo seconded the plan, eager to attack as he was, and assured Michael that the men would fight until victory was attained. Faced with this ultimatum from his two senior sub-commanders, the emperor had no choice. They would attack the next day. When the morning of the 22nd of June 813 came, the contending armies of the Eastern Roman Empire and the First Bulgarian Empire marched out of their camps and drew up into battle formation. The ground on which the forces drew up was a partially wooded plain, dotted with rolling hills to the north of Adrianople. Krum's army was outnumbered, but it formed up nonetheless. Two lines of predominantly Slavic infantry were in the centre, and two contingents of cavalry supported each wing. Some of this mainly Bulgar cavalry were horse archers, while the Khan himself led a force of heavily armoured melee cavalry as a personal guard. In order to mask his strength, Krum placed the first line in full sight of Michael I's army and hid the second behind one of the rolling hills of the landscape, obscuring it from view. On the other side of the field were the Romans, stationed on the lip of a ridge. Theme levies on the left and right side of the line were led by Leo the Armenian and John Aplakes respectively, while elite tagmata accompanied Emperor Michael in the centre. As planned, John opened the battle with a furious charge, his first line consisting of Macedonian troops charging down the gradual slope and colliding with Krum's left. A violent melee then ensued, in which the more heavily armoured Romans began to gain superiority over their enemy. Under the pressure, the Bulgar left side began to buckle. Sensing an opportunity, the Balkan commander then fed his Thracian contingent into the fray, reinforcing the Macedonians. Fighting on their home soil and extensively trained, these men were the least demoralized on the field, and they performed admirably. After a while of this constant pressure, Krum's left began to crack, showing signs of breaking completely. It was surely only a matter of time until the Empire's glorious victory. While John's European forces were winning on the right, the Emperor just watched the fighting. He did nothing and was more a spectator than a commander. Michael failed to issue any attack order either to his own troops or Leo's wing. His reasons for doing so are not known, but it could be either that he viewed John as a political threat, or was simply just incompetent, not understanding the tactical necessities of the time. Whatever the reason, indecision was the order of the day. The Roman left and centre remained inert on the ridgeline, watching their comrades fight. Krum saw the inaction among his enemy and took advantage accordingly, ordering his second line to reinforce the crumbling left. These bolstering troops included Bulgar horse archers, which outflanked John's Macedonians and Thracians, harrying them with a continuous stream of arrows, while Krum's elite heavy horsemen smashed into their enemy. On the ridge, the Anatolian troops under Leo suddenly began to withdraw in good order. Why this happened is not known either, but it has been widely speculated that Leo was a traitor who struck a deal with Krum before the battle to abandon the field. More horse archers were sent after the Anatolians, and this transformed what was an orderly withdrawal into a panicked rout. Seeing this, Michael's unengaged tagmata in the centre turned and ran as well, unnerved by the flight of Leo's troops. As more and more Bulgar reinforcements began to overwhelm John's soldiers, this man, who was by all accounts a brave and competent officer, perished alongside many of his men. Having barely lasted an hour, the Battle of Versinikia was over, and Krum was in disbelief. The Khan strictly forbade any immediate pursuit, skeptical that the odd withdrawals were real. When Krum realized he had actually won that easily, a chase was not possible. His forces had found the spoils in the Roman camp and set to looting it. As Michael, his tagmata, and the Anatolians headed for Constantinople, around 3,000 Romans lay dead on the field, mostly Balkan troops. This defeat worsened the Empire's situation and gave Krum the chance to launch attacks in Constantinople's immediate vicinity. It also sealed the fate of Emperor Michael I, who was dethroned in favour of his allegedly treacherous Anatolian commander, who took the Roman throne as Leo V soon after. This was not the end of Byzantium's encounters with Bulgaria, and more epic battles would come in the future, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible. Now you can also support us by buying our merchandise via the link in the description. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.